Welcome, FNusa57 here. Once again, I'm back on my Xbox Series X today. Also, funny enough, on my birthday, but to bring you another Elden Ring video. The servers were down for maintenance, so I apologize for the delay on getting this video posted. This is going to be a complete tutorial, so there will be timestamps in the description if you wish to skip ahead to different parts, but I will be covering what, in my opinion, is completely the most broken, outrageous, should not be used, absolutely maddening, tear your hair out PvP build currently in the game after the most recent patch, and it is going to be the Frenzied Burst Madness build. Now, this has been in the game for a while, but the most recent buff to the way that arcane scaling works has actually made this build like ridiculously maddening, to say the least. And of course, I had to go and find a few things to go with the build to optimize it even further. So the primary point of this guide is to explain exactly how the build works, so you can use it if need to let the community know about this build so you can be prepared for it in case you do run into it in PvP, which you probably will. And lastly, to provide what limited countermeasure information there is against this build for the inevitable chance that you do run into it. So, this build basically relies on an incantation called Frenzied Burst, hence the name, and the Madness modifier. Now, the first thing that I'm going to show you is how to get all of the supporting items for this build. I also have separate videos for some of the more complicated items. With that being said, then I will explain the build, demo the build from the perspective of the host of fingers, and demo the build from the perspective of the invader, and lastly provide information on how to counter it, so go ahead and check those timestamps. The very first thing that we need to make this build work is the actual incantation, which can be obtained at a relatively low level. Once you get into the lakes area, you're going to be looking for the spot pretty much on the northwestern cliff of the northeastern side of the lake. That spot is called the Church of Inhibition. Funny enough, you actually can come here for the Dead Maiden. Check out my Vara's questline for that. And then you will need to go just down from that spot to where I have this marker. It's a little bit to the southeast, pretty much exactly due southeast. And you will see a golden beetle, or scarab, whatever you want to call it. It's very easy to tell where it is. You can hear it, and more importantly, you will see a number of rats around. If you get close enough to the rats, you can tell that their eyes are golden and on fire. So basically, they're afflicted with madness. What you want to do is get a lock on that beetle, and then go ahead and take it out, because this beetle slash scarab is what actually gives us the incantation that we need. Of course, he's a little bit annoying to hit, so dealer's choice on what you want to use, and that will give you the brand new Frenzied Burst incantation. If you're not in combat with the rats, you can go ahead and get out of there, and then the next thing that you're going to need is you're going to need to pick up a seal in order to cast that incantation. The seal is actually one of the easier items to get, and it is located in a dungeon that most people skip. So right at the first step, which is like considered the tutorial area, there is a fog wall that is unlocked by using 2 stone sword keys on a stone imp statue. 99% of players will just simply run right past this. And this is the Stranded Graveyard. Now, this dungeon is a little annoying because it's filled with poison and it's also filled with chariots. But if you can make it past the poison, make it past the chariots, go down the path, and then look for the section where the path leads back up while dodging the chariots, you will eventually come to a very small room, and in that small room, you will find the item that you pretty much need most. and that is going to be one of the seals. So you can do this with any seal. I don't have the Frenzied Flame seal to actually demo it with, but the Frenzied Flame seal would not be as good. The trick here is relying on the Madness Stagger Lock. And in order to do that, we're going to take advantage of the secret effect of the Dragon Communing seal, which is the seal that you get from this dungeon like I just explained. Now, this also boosts Dragon Communing incantations as well. And of course, you can use it to cast any other incantation, but specifically, its passive boosts how quickly certain status effect ailments build up on the target. It does take Somber Smithing Stones to upgrade, but as long as you have a decent amount of Arcane and like a +4, +5 Talisman, you should be able to pull off the basics of this build no problem. So once you have that item, you're going to want to pick up 2 other items. The next, and in my opinion, most important item is going to be the Concealing Veil Talisman. This talisman works better in PvP than PvE. It conceals the wearer while you're crouched away from foes, and it's basically about the same distance that you have to be for Rot Breath. That talisman is a little harder to get to because you have to actually get up to the Altus Plateau, which means you have to unlock the Grand Lift of Dectus or go up the side path and go through a couple of bosses. But eventually you'll proceed to the northeast and find the Sage's Cave. Defeating the boss in the Sage's Cave rewards the talisman. Also, talismans can be dropped by other players. There are 2 other items that complement this build extremely well, but they are completely optional. They are both Ashes of War, and they're surprisingly relatively easy to get. You're probably already familiar with the Ash of War Bloodhound Step, and then you might not be familiar with the Ash of War Raptor of the Mists. Both of these Ashes of War are incredibly useful on either weapons that you want to deal damage with or just weapons to carry the invasion and evasion chances while you're actually invading. Mostly you're using them to either gain distance from an opponent, or you're using them to close the distance, or simply you're using them for the immunity frames, because both of these Ashes of War have high immunity frames. And once again, you can equip them on pretty much the majority of weapons that are not special weapons. In order to get those, one of them you can pick up in the area just northeast of the main gate. When you do the invasion, the main academy gate, you can pick up the Raptor of the Mists, but you have to do part of the Finger Hunter Yara's questline. And then the Bloodhound Step you can pick up from defeating the Knights Cavalry in Caelid, of course at night, just to the north of Lenny's Rise. And then you have to put those on any weapon that you want to put those on. The last item is located very far up in the consecrated snowfields. About right at this point, I don't actually have the map fragment for it, but this item is the Black Knife armor set. And more specifically, it is the Black Knife chestplate. That's the item that you're looking for. And the reason why you're looking for this is it specifically states that the trace powers that remain on the veil muffles the sound of footsteps. However, when it says muffle, it really means eliminate. As you can hear, my character just walking around and rolling makes a ton of noise. But simply by equipping that one chestplate and changing nothing else, my character is now basically silent in all movements except for a slight swish when I roll. Almost completely undetectable. There is another item that you can get to complement this. However, it doesn't work as well as I had hoped, or really as well as the spell states. and that is the Unseen Form, which makes the caster semi-invisible. It really just makes you transparent, but honestly doesn't help that much. So I wouldn't go out of your way to get that. And in terms of blocking it, there's really not much that you can get in terms of blocking this. So the way that you want to set up this build, whether you're invading or not, is going to be as follows. And this is pretty much key depending on your build. You're going to want to change it up and definitely keep your Dragon Communing Seal as a left-hand armament. And then you can keep a primary armament that's strong that you want to use, or a staff if you want to cast magic. You can use a shield if you're looking to block, but the whole thing about this build and the way that it works is you're basically going to be relying on evasion, stealth, looking for the opportunity to strike, and when your opportunity to strike presents itself, you're going to stun lock and annihilate your target within maybe 1 to 3 casts, more than likely only 1 or 2 casts depending on your level. So you can pretty much feel free to drop the majority of your weapons from the right hand armament slot. The only thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that in your right hand armament, if you are going to carry a weapon like Rivers of Blood or something super OP for its actual ability use, obviously that would need to be in your right hand slot. So I like to dual wield katanas in addition to being a mage. For this build, though, I'm going to unequip my shield because it's honestly kind of pointless. I'll keep my Rivers of Blood in my right hand, and I will keep my Dragon Communing Seal in my left hand. And then I will equip 2 other weapons. They can be daggers if you want, but I'm just demoing this, so remember you don't need both. I recommend either whatever weapon has Raptor of the Mists on, or the Bloodhound Step. Personal preference at the end of the day, which one you actually wish to use, but it's completely up to you. For the purposes of this demo, I'll keep both weapons equipped. Your armor is completely up to you, doesn't matter. Your talismans are going to be completely up to you, but if at all possible, you really want to focus on damage and pretty much like cast speed. So a few things that you could use but are not 100% required would be like the Ritual Sword Talisman, which it raises attack power when your HP is at maximum. That's a good one if you have it. You could use the Blessed Dew Talisman to slowly restore your HP, but again, personal preference. You can use the Green Turtle Talisman to recover your stamina faster, but you're not really going to be running away that much, so again, personal preference. If you need to use like the Erd Tree's Favor, or if you need the Jar's Arsenal, you can use those talismans just to boost your overall stats. It's really personal preference at the end of the day. I wouldn't recommend boosting anything that is increasing the amount of damage that you take. If you wanted to get a little bit higher faith level, you could use like the Two Fingers Heirloom, or if you wanted some more resistance, you could use some of the Crest Shields, or really the Pearl Drake Talisman, which this goes back to countering this build. The only thing that really helps against it is the Pearl Drake Talisman and the Clarifying Horn, which raises focus. But since most players that aren't mages don't have a high mind stat, they usually will not be able to counter you on this. Most of the other talismans don't honestly help you out, except for maybe like the one that raises the potency of incantations. Anything that raises your attack power or raises the potency of incantations you could use, but really completely personal preference at the end of the day. You can gain a little bit more holy attack, or if you're looking for the blood loss, you can go with that. It's all personal preference when it comes to that last talisman slot. completely personal preference. I would probably say if you're looking to fight against this build, because it's so popular now, a lot of people don't know how to do it, but it is very popular, that the Clarifying Horn charm would be a decent one to throw on if you have nothing else. So armor, personal preference. You definitely need the Concealing Veil. You want the Black Knife armor chest plate. The other talismans are personal preference. The other armor pieces are personal preference. The weapons that you use are personal preference. And really the only other thing that you need to have is one decent weapon in case you run into melee combat, and the Dragon Communing Seal. Now, if you can carry it as far as a weapon and you have it, it isn't a bad idea to use, and it's actually very popular to use Vike's War Spear, which I don't have upgraded currently, but this is one of the few weapons that also causes madness buildup. So just kind of keep that in mind. And now I will begin to demo the build. At first it will be from the prospect of defending against the build, and other than that it will be from actually using the build. So bear with me for just a moment. I should mention that while I'm fast traveling, defense against this really heavily relies on two things. One, if you can see the attack coming, you can either A, block it with a Great Shield, or B, you can roll away and dodge it. But if you can't see it coming, the chances of you actually being able to dodge it are slim to none. The other thing that you can do is you can raise your focus stat. So if you go into your stats and you look at your resistances, the focus amount, you can raise that by increasing the number of points that you have in mind, and that will give you more focus, or by using things like that Clarifying Horn. However, it's really only a stopgap band-aid against this build, and the reason for it is because when you proc Madness, not only do you do damage to the opponent's health, they also take damage to their maximum FP, and they are stunned for a brief period of time, but the spell is able to be cast so fast that the stun is actually capable of being a stun lock. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to put on a shield just to test and show you the difference between blocking it or not. I am going to currently summon my friend who is going to help me out with this, Miltonic Plague. Huge shout out to the dude for staying on late to help me out with this. I truly appreciate it. So first off, I'm going to kind of show, or try to show, a little bit defending against it. And then I will show from the invader's standpoint. Now, defending against it is a lot harder than actually using it. And as you can see, I literally can't do anything against that. Now, that did take 3 hits to kill me, but keep in mind, my level is pretty high, my armor is pretty good, and, well, that's the stun lock. I literally could not do anything against it, and you've seen how I didn't even really have time to see that attack coming because of the talisman's effect. So, now we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at the build, or a closer look, I should say, at using it and defending against it, and then I will show you actually using it. This time, I want you to go ahead and hit me with the Frenzied Burst, but I'm going to actually block it, and you'll see how less damage I take. So basically, if you can see the attack coming and you can avoid the first attack, it's possible to close the distance on the target, and this spell is actually ridiculously easy to avoid or to block. But if you don't keep avoiding it, 2 hits is enough to stagger you, and then there's really no way to get out of it. So that it is possible blocking it, but it's very difficult to do it. Very easy to avoid if you see it coming, I should say, but not easy to defend against. The only two options for defending against it are to use a shield to block it, or trying to use a spell to go ahead, or Ash of War to go ahead and evade it completely. It's actually really OP with that. Alright, first though, I do want to showcase this Ash of War though. So with like a regular melee hit, go ahead and try to hit me. The timing on it's a little annoying, but there's way more immunity frames with that than with almost any other of the dodge mechanics, except for then like trying to use the Bloodhound's step. Interesting. You'll keep the target lock, but can you actually hit me? Like, you can really easily get away. I hit the wrong button and used my heal, but, you know, somebody gets within melee distance of you, you can easily just back up and then hit that incantation and knock them. It's kind of ridiculous. You can also, if you have your regular, like, left-hand armament equipped, you can go ahead and close the distance and engage and then back off using that Bloodhound step. So it's actually kind of OP, really. And I'm not really doing anything special other than left trigger in the attack and left trigger back. Now, of course, if you knew it was coming, you can kind of dodge it a little bit. But then also I can just simply back off and go for the frenzy attack. And it still goes through. Like, the status applied is so ridiculous. Even through shields, it's crazy. But the biggest thing is being able to be invisible. Like, your target can't see you. Your target has no idea that you're there, and then it's simply, if you want, you can close the distance if you need to, cast again, and they're dead. It's honestly broken. If you ask me, I think it's broken. Because they can't see you due to the talisman since you're crouched. They can't hear you due to the black knife armor. And then there's a stun lock. So unless the target survives the first hit and doesn't actually take the madness buildup on the first hit, there's basically no way to survive it. And this time, I'll try to buff it even further. There might be another talisman or something out there that could possibly even buff more, but I'm not aware of it at this particular time, so. But I do know that you could use Golden Vow on top of it, because the requirements are so, honestly, they're so ridiculously low to cast it. It's crazy. Golden Vow, yeah, it costs 47 FP, but it only takes 25 faith, so that's not even that much. And Frenzied Burst only takes 22 faith, so it's even lower to cast. Plus, if you really wanted to, you could do the Vike's Dragon Bolt, just to add that little bit of extra insult to it. The sad thing is, I haven't really found a good counter to it, except for blocking it with a high-grade shield. And that would be the only thing, is blocking it with a high-grade shield. Like, maybe the fingerprint shield, but honestly, the fingerprint shield would be about it. And if you can't see your target, because you've got no bloody idea where they are, thanks to the talisman, then you get hit by it. Now, of course, if you see it coming, you're good. But other than that, it's a stun lock. It's, like, insane. So, I mean, it's a trade-off if you're gonna use Golden Vow, because you can kind of see you can see the vow portion of it. And that also means you should probably be able to see somebody if they're using the ritual sword talisman, because I was on that. But other than that, I mean, that ritual sword talisman isn't actually required. You can literally put anything on. I'll just take that off. I'll actually take all of my talismans off and lay my summon sign down one more time to demo it without anything else affecting the buff. Yeah. And even though I'm walking around and I'm invisible, you can kind of see the ripples in the water from where I'm walking. But it's like ridiculously faint. Like you pretty much have to be right on top of it, looking at just the slightest change in the water. So, yeah, it's stupidly OP. All you have to do is buy yourself a little bit of time, get an opening, and then engage. And if you miss with that first shot, then it's a problem. But of course, you can always use Bloodhound Step to gain distance back, go back invisible again, and wear your target down that way. It does take a little bit to get used to the distance that Frenzied Burst is capable of engaging at, just because of the fact that it's like such a annoying spell. There's no way to really tell exactly how far away you are from your target to be invisible versus visible. It would be nice if there was like a little icon on that, like a little eye or something over the target that you were locked on to, so you knew whether they could see you or not at that distance. But still, even without that, that is a incredibly broken build, in my opinion. Now, I am doing a little more damage with it than probably the average person who just got the items would be, but that's because my Dragon Communing Seal is +8 and my Arcane stat is scaled up to 99. However, I believe the base you need to proc, depending on the person's armor and if they actually block the attack with a shield, you only need about 40 points in Arcane and like a +4 or 5 Talisman to stack enough of the Madness effect to actually proc that stun. And once you've got the opponent stunned, then pretty much you're guaranteed the fight. The only thing would be if there's a summon that, you know, can get in the way and block it, but then you can always kill them too in the same manner. So I would say be very, very careful about your surroundings. Pay attention if you're in water. And ideally carry a good shield. Try to raise your focus stat any way possible. But outside of that, I don't know of any effective counter to this particular Frenzied Burst in its current form with the game's current update. I mean, you can technically counter the Ashes of War. Their immunity frames are long, but not impossible to counter. However, Topher's Barrier, Eternal Darkness, pretty much everything that you would use to block something or parry it just does not block Frenzied Burst. The only thing is a shield, and the shield simply mitigates the damage and some of the status buildup. But I don't know too many people that are running around in the game with, like, you know, great shields equipped, unless you're a super tanky build. So, that's all I can say. Now, if you do have any questions, comments, anything like that, I'd love your opinion on this guide and the build and the playstyle. Honestly, I don't recommend it in PvP because it is a troll build, but I had a dude use it against me and stream snipe me, so I decided to figure out exactly what he was using and how I could make it as OP as possible so that I could try to figure out a way to actually counter against it, and this is the best that I have been able to come up with. But by all means, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are, so let me know in the comment section. And if you enjoyed the video, or it helped out, or at least now you know how you got killed in PvP by someone that you didn't even see, please slap that like button, and of course subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay frosty.